Mental Health Awareness Week, month 2021. My name is Raj and I'm the CEO of MindHug. This year obviously is extra special in many ways because of the strange world we find ourselves in. For those of you who do not know us, MindHug, we understand the one-size-fits-all approach to mental well-being needs a little bit of challenge, and we're on a mission to change this. The way we're going to do this is make a wider choice of therapies more accessible, more affordable, and more personalized than ever before. We're trying to do this in a way where we can combine the best of digital with the best of therapist-led solutions. We believe the role of the therapist is becoming ever more important, and we want to complement some of the great work they're doing. Throughout the next few days and the next few weeks, for that matter, because we're going to be going throughout the month, we'll bring together many therapists we have worked closely with. Many of them are actually MindHug partners. So to kick things off, I won't waste much more time. We have Simon Woodward, who's joined us today. Thanks for joining us, Simon. Simon is an amazing art psychotherapist, and I think it's a perfect way to start our first session because he specializes in using nature in a lot of the work he does, and we know the theme for this year is nature. He's going to be, I think we're going to be dealing with imposter syndrome, but we're going to be looking at an exercise using art therapy as part of this. I'm not going to take much more time because I know everyone's waiting to get into the session. Thad, who is our Chief Medical Officer, and right over there on screen as well, will lead the session, and I'll pop away from your screen now. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Thad and Simon. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Raj.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Thaddeus Chong. I'm a psychiatrist and Chief Medical Officer of MindHug. I just wanted to welcome everyone here today and invite and say a very warm welcome to Simon Woodward. Hello Simon, how are you?
Good morning. Well, thank you. Yes, thank you for this opportunity to share my experience and my proposition of working with MindHug.
So as Raj said, you are an art psychotherapist, is that right?
Yes, yeah, I am. I'm an art psychotherapist. I qualified about 10 years ago, and my experience post-qualification has led me on a journey to explore imposter syndrome and various other syndromes connected to that.
Okay. Just for the audience who may not know what art psychotherapy is, do you mind explaining what it is?
Sure, absolutely. Well, art psychotherapy is where art is the primary source, primary medium of communication. So I think, generally speaking, people are more aware of talking therapies, but with art therapy, it gives an extra layer. So it may be that it's difficult to communicate through words what you're feeling inside, what's happening for you. And the art adds an extra dimension to that we can explore what's happening for you, not only through words, but through the image as well. So the image can be a starting point to a conversation, or you can explore what's happening for you directly through the art medium.
Okay, so you're using art as a medium to do psychotherapy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's still exploring our unconscious processes, but we have the added value of the artists to help clients on with that process.
Okay. Could you tell the audience a little bit the difference between psychotherapy and counseling?
Right. Okay. Well, generally, counselling deals with day-to-day issues, what's happening for you in the moment. With psychotherapy, it goes a little bit deeper, so it explores your background, what primarily probably what happened in your childhood that creates patterns, emotional patterns throughout your life that you're not always aware of. So by going back and looking at the original source of those patterns, you can start breaking those unhelpful patterns of behavior and emotions to create a situation where you're dealing with what's happening in the here and now rather than being influenced by the hurt and pain that happened years ago.
Okay, that's very interesting. You mentioned earlier the phrase unconscious processes. And I think what you were trying to say is a lot of us, we do things or think things and we're not entirely aware of why it is we do it or think it. And a lot of it has to do with our upbringing, our past trauma. And I think psychotherapy can really help people deal with that and bring it into consciousness, so to speak.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
very interesting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting with the art making as well that you can work through those unconscious patterns, those things you're not aware of in the art itself. So sometimes you're not, and you don't even have to be able to talk about it. It's there in the artwork, and you process it through the artwork.
And that's why art therapy is so popular with children, because it allows them to express their thoughts through something else, which is art. Great.
Yeah, absolutely, because they can't always put it into words.
Hmm. And how would art psychotherapy work, or how does it benefit adults? And
well, it's a very similar process. Again, sometimes, as you quite rightly put down, we're not aware of what's going on in the background. Our emotional background. So again, that it can work with adults where you create an image that you had no idea what was going on for you, and there it appears in the image. It's one of the beauties of the job, is that all of a sudden somebody's issue, something that's really painful to them, has come out in the art making. And sometimes it can be quite intimidating to sit in front of somebody and tell them your innermost secrets in that face-to-face. It can be quite anxiety provoking. So to put it down into art can be a lot more comfortable.
Okay, so if I get what you're saying is, for some people who may find it difficult to express their thoughts or feelings, or have a face-to-face talking therapy, art might be a good way of expressing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. Okay. And you mentioned that you've been doing this for 10 years, Simon. How did you end up becoming an art psychotherapist? What's your journey?
It's quite a long journey. I spent 10 years as an art director in the marketing and advertising industry. I've been a bookseller. I was 10 years as a support worker working with adults with learning disabilities in an all-male household, which informed my later practice working with young men in art therapy. And I kind of sort of, through my own personal experience, when I was younger, I wanted to make sure that my experience didn't go to waste, that I could empathize with what potentially could be going on for other people. And I wanted to combine my love of art with that process. So that's why I undertook the training, which is a 3-year MA. And after that, you become a HCPC registered art therapist. But then after I finished the training, I started some additional training in nature-based therapies.
Okay. I'd really like to talk about nature-based in a second, but I just wanted to draw on the fact that you said HCPC registered, which means a lot of people don't recognize that art therapy or art psychotherapy is a proper form of psychotherapy.
Absolutely. It's a government registered title. So it's a Healthcare and Professionals Council registered title.
And then you mentioned nature-based art therapy. What is that?
Well, it's been the twin passions in my life, has been art and being in nature. I get a great deal from that, and the evidence is out there now that being in nature is extremely good for us.
Definitely.
So I've kind of I did a variety of different courses after I graduated, looking at how a safe way, the philosophy behind working outdoors, how there's a kind of there's a joint experience of being out in nature with somebody. So it can be a much deeper experience working with a therapist because you're in nature together. And there's wonderful metaphors that you can use in nature. I do art making with natural materials outdoors, but also it can be, I remember on one occasion, I was working with a group outdoors, and we came across this tree struck by lightning, but it was still continuing to grow. It got green shoots, and it had a profound. One of the group members said it stopped her in her tracks. She said, "Oh my God, that tree is like me." She'd been she'd had various psychotic breakdowns, but had still survived. So she likened the tree being struck by lightning to having a psychotic breakdown, but she had recovered from it. So they're very powerful metaphors that can be found in nature.
That's quite strong imagery, I would say. Yeah. And is this art therapy in nature something you developed, or is there a group that actually practice nature-based art therapy?
It's a relatively new field. I mean, I think it's probably been going about 20 years, but only really taken off in the last 10 years. There are various training modules that you can do. I did mine through the London Art Therapy Centre, an environmental arts therapy training, which was a 12-month course, which looked at the seasonal changes in nature and how you can relate that to the human psyche, the different trees that can be related to different aspects of ourselves. So there are various training courses out there.
And at the moment, would you say most of your work is done outside or inside? I mean, not taking into account COVID, obviously.
Sure. I mean, the majority of art therapists are working indoors, at the moment. And, it's been an interesting experience over the last 12 months doing that via Zoom. I've done a lot of that as well. But it's, where appropriate, following guidelines, I've been working outdoors as well.
How have you managed to transition from an outdoor nature-based art therapy into something online? What are the things that you've been doing?
Well, it's really taking the themes that exist in nature, and also as well, what I've become increasingly interested in is evolutionary psychology. Okay. So that if we take the present, our present brain structure and the way that we feel and think, that's only 200,000 years old. That's as long as the modern brain has existed. That's a really short space of time. Well, the vast majority of that has been in hunter-gatherer societies, where there's a close connection between nature and between, people within tribes, within close-knit societies. So we're still using that brain formation, that way of being in the world, in a modern setting. So it's kind of sort of going back to, inevitably, if you go that far back, you're also talking about our relationship with the natural world and how that informs how we think and feel. So there's a really strong link there between evolutionary psychology and outdoor art therapy.
I think that naturally leads us on to our main topic today, which is imposter syndrome. I think that has its roots in evolutionary psychology, as you mentioned, just the ways we think negatively to, I suppose, preserve ourselves, and that comes from our caveman era.
Absolutely, yeah, because imposter syndrome. It is that feeling of being a fraud, of the terror of being found out that you're just not good enough. That you kind of sort of you haven't earned the job situation that you're in. You haven't really earned. It's by luck or chance that you had to get into a good university, and it's a very powerful visceral feeling, that anxiety. And if you look at it objectively, that seems a bit of a strange thing, that you're getting very worried just because you're about to be found out. But in actual fact, it's lethal from an evolutionary point of view. Because again, if we take it back to the group hunter-gatherer situation, those small groups, your very survival is based on approval of the group. So if you do something to upset the group, you've done something wrong, you're ostracized, you're kicked out from the group, and you're left alone on the savannah to be eaten by a lion. So that's why it's such a powerful feeling. And again, this idea of this, being in the environment, the threat of the environment, and falling out with the social group. That's why it feels so powerful.
Okay. I suppose we have touched on what imposter syndrome is, but do you want to give a brief introduction to the audience about what it actually is?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'll just get my notes in front of me. So again, as I say, it stems from the shameful feeling that one isn't good enough.
Mm.
So it tends to more happen in work situations and education systems. It can happen within relationships as well. And I say it's accompanied by this persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. That you're kind of sort of, there's a split between what you're presenting to the outside world and what you feel inside. And there's that terror of the subsequent humiliation, that social humiliation. And it can be experienced by a variety of people, but there are certain sectors of the population that are more prone to imposter syndrome than others. Some form of childhood trauma, or kind of sort of not getting an ideal sort of upbringing where you felt unloved. That's again the realm of the psychotherapist to help you with that. Interestingly, it tends to affect people who are of above average intelligence. And the reason that is because when you have a certain amount of intelligence, you know what you know, but you also know what you don't know. So you're very aware of the gaps in your information. And in this day and age, if you think with the internet, we've got this vast amount of information available to us, and it's an imposter syndrome's nightmare, because there's an endless amount of information out there. And where do you stop in terms of feeling as though you know enough to do the job or the training that you're involved in? It particularly with women, it can be an issue. Again, because we've made great advancements within the feminist movement. But there's still a long way to go. And in a lot of situations, women are seen as second-class citizens. And again, that immediately puts them on the back foot, as though what they've got to offer isn't quite as good as their male counterparts. And also ethnic minorities. Again, they've kind of sort of unconsciously or consciously being put down as second-class citizens, but not quite good enough as other ethnic groups, the prevailing ethnic groups. So it's really interesting with imposter syndrome that it's one of the few mental health conditions where there is a huge social and sort of political element to the condition. And then I guess it's worth mentioning that often high achievers can feel like frauds as well, can suffer from imposter syndrome, because they've done these amazing things, made amazing things happen, had great careers, but they've never internalized the success. They've never emotionally said, yes, I've done good things in the world. So there's a variety of people there, but there's a tendency for particular sorts of people to have to deal with imposter syndrome than others.
Would you say that almost everyone would have felt imposter syndrome at some stage in their life? It's context specific.
Yeah,
but I think it's quite a common feeling, and it's something that a lot of people don't talk about, that they do experience. I can certainly, now that you've mentioned, think back of when you mentioned the knowing that you don't know. That's certainly played a big part in my feelings of imposter syndrome, especially when I graduated from medical school and you're thrown into the deep end working in a hospital. I certainly knew a lot of things, but I also knew that I wasn't really capable in certain aspects as a doctor, and being shoved into the front line and expected to do everything and know everything, that certainly led to me feeling like a bit like an imposter.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you do, and I think you make a very good point, Thad. Is that we tend to feel it when we go into a new environment. It's kind of sort of inevitably, when we're learning something new or a new environment, we're always on the edge of what we know and what we don't know. So yeah,
that's right.
I can empathise with your feelings in that situation.
And this just made me think of a lot of people don't feel comfortable putting themselves out there because of this imposter feeling, and maybe they tell themselves, I'll only put myself out there once I've attained mastery. But I don't think that's a very helpful way of thinking or doing things. Where am I going with this? What I was about to say is, How can imposter syndrome hinder someone's successes and achievements, do you think?
Right. Okay. Well, it's an interesting paradox, isn't it? Because the imposter syndrome is actually a survival technique.
Mm.
So your part of your brain is trying to save you from the humiliation. So it's anxiety provoking.
Mm.
And we know that there's extensive research done on what happens to our brain when we're in an anxious state. We lose the capacity to think. It's our more primitive, fearful brain that takes over, that can't think. So when you're in a workplace situation or a training institution, you want to be able to use your mind to its full capacity. But if you're worried all the time, you can't think clearly. So it ends up being a kind of sort of catch-22. The more anxious you are, the more you feel as though you're an imposter, because you can't think clearly about the job, and it just goes round and round in a circle. And from my point of view, I've met and it's heartbreaking for me, because I've met some fabulous students on my travels through kind of sort of working with trainee art therapists and with students in education establishments providing art therapy, and they have fabulous talents, but they're constantly putting themselves down all the time. They're just not fulfilling their potential, and that fulfilling their potential in terms of making life that much better for them, but also their capacity to give something to the wider environment, the wider society.
So what do you think people who experience imposter syndrome can do about challenging those thoughts?
Right. Okay. What a nicest possible way of saying join a Mindhug course. There's sort of four components that you can do to. I think if you're going to explore something yourself, I think there's a lot out there on self-compassion work that originated as a Buddhist philosophy, but it's now gone into a secular environment with compassion-focused therapy, and there are lots of books on compassion-focused therapy. And I think just being kind to yourself is a really good step for learning the techniques, learning ways that you can do that. I used to do it via visualizations. Often we have this critical voice in our head, and learning how to create a more benign, supportive but strong voice in your head that's kind to you. In recent years, there's been an emphasis on self-esteem, and it's now become evident that building your self-esteem is not actually useful, because self-esteem is about comparing yourself to somebody else. You've got a list of what your achievements, etc. But with self-compassion, being kind to yourself, giving yourself a break, but also being honest about the way that you think and the way that you do things, could be really useful.
I think self-compassion and self-esteem are two different things, and they almost can exist alongside each other. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So were there how about any practical things someone can do if they're feeling a bit like an imposter?
Right. Okay. Well, I think we've kind of we've highlighted, we've had a chat about this, and there is one particular exercise that you can do, that's based on the idea that we're designed to compare ourselves to other people.
Mm-hmm.
But what can happen is that we can compare our anxious, not good enough interior to people's exterior that seems to be confident, outgoing, seems to know what they're doing. As much as there is the joys of social media, this can be a particular problem within social media, because you see somebody's external world and they're putting out the best of what's happening to them, and you're comparing to those negative feelings with it inside. So what we can do is, there is an exercise that you can do where you can challenge those feelings by thinking about the compliments or the positive things that people have said about you, but because of your negative self-belief, you haven't accepted them, haven't taken them on board, haven't internalized them, to give them the technical term. So what you can do is you can get either a very large sheet of paper, and get somebody to draw around the outside of you to create a body image. Now,
Okay.
I think that
I've prepared one
here's
already.
one we did earlier.
There we go.
So I think the guys can see that there's a body shape there.
Okay, so what do you do with this?
So what you can do is write in the inside of your body all those kind of sort of not good enough sort of statements that you feel inside.
Okay.
Now, this might be a bit of a challenge. So there are various, you can kind of think about your intelligence, ability to learn, making a valuable contribution, all that sort of thing. So I'll leave
So
it.
what should I write? What should I write? And negative things that I may have thought in the past about myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
All those
So
internal comments about not being good enough and your feelings of being a fraud and imposter. You write those within the internal body shape.
I will write this all down and then show it to the screen in a second.
Okay. So sometimes it's difficult to come up with these things. So with the actual exercise, I will call up a list of things that people can, the ideas.
Okay, so I've written 1, 2, 3, 4 here, and I'm not sure if you can read this, but I am not good enough is the first one, followed by I'm not the best, so why would they hire me, for example? People will realize I'm a fraud, and I will let everyone down.
Right. Okay. So some very powerful statements then.
Mm.
So I can totally understand. I think that probably, kind of sort of resonates with quite a few people. So what I invite you to do now is have a think about alternative statements to that. Maybe if you can think about important people in your life that have said that you are good enough, that you have that you're, that you have these positive qualities, and just write them down on a separate bit of paper.
Okay, so I have these tiny sheets of paper here. So I'll be writing down, what would you say? Does it have to be an exact opposite of what I've written down?
No,
No.
not at all.
So just positive.
Oh, I've lost my list. I was going to bring up a. So it could be. Let me see if I can get that list up. You can see that list.
Oh yeah. Okay.
You're intelligent, able to learn. You're important. You make a valuable contribution. You deserve to be happy. You do the best that you can. You're trusted. You are capable. Do a good job. You work hard and persevere. You're as smart as your colleagues. So there's various things that we can, in the actual exercise, base your thinking on.
And is it important that you write "you are" because that brings into it's just sort of like a reframing the thoughts and convincing yourself
absolutely.
that you are that sort of thing.
That's a very good point, Thad, because it's sometimes it's helpful to put it into the third person. You are. And then research has been done on that to say that it's actually more effective in changing your mindset.
So I've come up with just 4 different ones, which I have written down. And do I place this into this drawing that I've? So I've got you are capable. So what do I do? Do I just cover up the negative words that I've
cover
written
up the
down? Yeah.
ones. Yeah.
Okay.
In an ideal scenario, you sort of glue them over the top, but placing them is just such a good idea.
Okay, so I've got you are capable, and then the next one's you are smart, and that's covering up. The second one, you earned this through merit, and then finally you deserve your success.
Great. Some really, really good positive statements. So the next part of the exercise is to really, to when you've been given those sort of comments, what it feels like, feel it within the body itself. And this is this is a really powerful thing to do, is to kind of sort of hold on to those feelings, how those statements make you feel, that positive feeling within yourself.
You're right. No, I can definitely feel it, and I'm gonna bring myself back up now. But what I really like about this is you can obviously practice this without the drawing, but just doing this practically was so much more impactful than talking, which I found today.
Oh, great! Oh, well, good. I'm glad it's been useful. And once those are stuck in place, is have that image in somewhere important that you can easily access it afterwards.
Yeah, no. So I can save this, and then if I'm ever feeling doubtful of myself, I can refer back to it. No, that's very powerful.
Absolutely.
Great. So this is something anyone can do right now at home whenever they feel like it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they don't need supervision or any guidance.
No, not at all.
Perfect.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah,
that's very good. No, thank you, Simon.
You're very welcome.
Was there anything? I just realized that we are running out of time here. Was there anything else about imposter syndrome that you'd like to talk about today before we wrap up?
Right, have a think. I think actually, I'll tell you what. I think what I might do is share an image with you, if I may. Really summed up how it can feel. This is something that I drew just after I qualified. I don't think you can see. Where are we?
There we go. There was a boy. Do you mind reading that for the audience?
There was a boy who was given a crown, but he wondered why this didn't apply to the way he felt about what he could do to make things right.
Wow. That's great.
And that's something that I created for myself when I was first struggling with imposter syndrome. And I can say that with, the sort of courses that we're proposing, everything that I've learned about putting myself into a better place to be able to do my job effectively and to get the most out of it, emotionally myself, my learning is in the Mindhug courses.
Okay, great. So could you briefly say or tell us what other things you touch on in your Mindhug course?
There's 4. It's 4 components. It's looking at self-criticism and the inner critic. It's looking at the fear of judgment. It's looking at perfectionism, and again the imposter syndrome. So there's those 4 areas that I'm developing in conjunction with Mindhug to kind of and those are the 4 areas that really impede our performance and getting the best out of our jobs and giving the best as well.
Okay, so imposter syndrome is just one aspect of it. You covered much more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
it's one aspect of it.
And who do you think would find your course useful?
I think it would be particularly useful for university students. I think it would be useful, particularly as we've touched upon, for graduates. It would be nice that and also for any professional who's out there that's kind of really struggling, has just started and really struggling with these feelings of imposter. And it may be even actually high achievers as well, who have still got this persistent feeling that what they're doing isn't good enough and it's driving them forward.
Yeah, well, you mentioned high achievers, so that led me to think, even business executives who may have
Yeah.
gotten a promotion and felt that they have negative thoughts about refusing to accept this achievement for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, as I mentioned before, kind of sort of minority groups as well would particularly benefit from these sort of from thinking and doing differently in the world.
Okay, great. Now I will just, I don't see that we've got any questions and we've run out of time. So I think I'll wrap this up, Simon. Thank you so
Okay.
much for coming on and sharing your course and some helpful tips on imposter syndrome.
You're very
Do
welcome.
you have any final words?
Just you're not stuck in this situation. There is help and support out there to get out of this situation. Yeah.
Great. And how can people find you? Do you have an email or a website?
I've got my personal website is arttherapywithsimon.co.uk. If they want to work with me individually or to contact MindHug for the some of the group work.
That's perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Simon. Hope to see you again.
See you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.